Good afternoon, friends of the media. Thank you for coming to the media stand-up. As the Chief Executive said this morning, after the Executive Council meeting, she'll be giving you the latest update. So because of the pandemic, please try to keep your distance in this session. The Chief Executive will now speak. Friends of the media, members of the public. As I said this morning, the Executive Council held its first meeting after the Chinese New Year holiday. It considered the latest situation of the pandemic and the response of the government. There was in-depth discussion. The EXCO members encouraged the team fighting the pandemic in the government to keep up its effort. The members also conveyed some views of the public and mentioned areas where improvement could be made. But definitely we will take these views very seriously to improve our arrangement. Now, since the 5th of January, this is the 6th press briefing I'm holding on the pandemic. That shows that there's been a rapid evolution of the pandemic and is coming on. Is raging fast. So the government needs to update its strategy in the light of the latest development. Now, the Executive Council endorsed certain arrangement this morning. First, there is it's endorsed the amendment to regulations under the Prevention and Control of Disease Ordinance. You are all familiar with CAP 599 under this ordinance. In the past 2 years, as we fought the virus, we have enacted various regulations such as CAP 599C, F, G, and so on. Today, the EXCO amended some of the regulations. We've also made a new regulation under CAP 599. These regulations are meant to achieve certain purposes. One, we have expanded the list of scheduled premises under CAP 599F. There are originally 17 types of scheduled premises, such as restaurants, fitness centers, beauty parlors, and so on. You're familiar with those. And we're adding 6 other types of premises to be subject to CAP 599F. That includes the religious venues, shopping malls, department stores, supermarkets, markets, and street markets, and also hair salons. So 6 types of premises. And for the purpose of the amendments is that in future, the Secretary for Food and Health may make directions. So for directions applicable to scheduled premises and closed premises, the direction will extend till the 24th of February midnight. Now, originally it's to expire on the 18th of February because every 14 days we would review whether there is need to extend the direction. Later on, the Secretary for Food and Health will issue a direction to extend these social distancing measures to the 24th of February midnight. And then there are 2 other types of premises to be included in the list. That is religious venues and hair salons. The direction will come into effect on the 10th of February, this Thursday. So together with other premises, the direction will be enforced until the 24th of February. I'm sure you all know what is the significance of the 24th of February. The third measure is that for premises subject to CAP 599F, the use of vaccine pass will be made mandatory. So that includes the existing 17 premises and the other 6 premises to be added to the list after the amendment of CAP 599F. So in other words, for 4 types of premises added to the list today, they don't need to be closed, but until the 24th of February, there's a need for the use of a Leave Home Safe app that includes street markets, market fairs, markets, supermarkets, and so on. So starting from the 24th of February, anyone who wants to enter these regulated premises, they will have to scan the Leave Home Safe app and also produce their vaccination record. Now we have updated the Leave Home Safe app. There's now version 3.02, so it will make it easy for premise operators to check the vaccination records on the Leave Home Safe app. I mentioned the vaccine pass will be launched more or less on the 24th of February, but then for some premises we would like to start the arrangement sooner as a pilot scheme. That's for restaurants, because as you might recall, in eating establishments there is already a requirement for staff members and customers to be vaccinated, and we've heard the views of the sector, so we will first launch the vaccine pass at restaurants. Now there will be regulations to require the use of the vaccine pass. The government will also be introducing other measures to launch the vaccine pass at places like schools, universities, and all premises with government subsidy. For example, daycare centers, activity centers, youth centers subsidized by the Social Welfare Department. That includes, of course, also offices of the public sector. For example, government offices, people have to be vaccinated before they will be able to enter soon. And then the fourth measure is to tighten the social gathering ban. Now, under CAP 599G, the cap of a gathering is 4 persons. Today we are amending that to 2 persons. Well, it was the case some time before, and now given the this severe epidemic, I hope the public will accept that we have to go back to the most stringent level. The fifth amendment is to introduce the gathering ban on private premises. We will spend more than 2 families in a cross-family gathering at private premises. The Sixth Amendment is to increase the penalty. Now, for those who do not comply with the compulsory testing requirement, either under the compulsory testing notices or the restriction testing declarations, if people do not comply with the compulsory testing requirement, at the moment the fixed penalty is $5,000, is going to be doubled to $10,000. The second batch of amendments have not been endorsed by the Executive Council, but the Executive Council noted the second batch of measures that we're going to work on. And this includes amending the employment ordinance to forestall any labor dispute as a result of our need to fight the virus. Now, we haven't yet completed the work. The Labour and Welfare Bureau will be amending the relevant legislation as soon as possible, and then this will be discussed at EXCO and then introduced to LegCo for the amendment to be considered. Now, there are 3 purposes to be served here. 1, for employees who could only go to work with a vaccine pass, but then the employee refuses to use a vaccine pass, so the person could not go to work. Now, if that's the case and the employee is dismissed by the employer, then under the amended regulation, legislation, it will not be regarded as unreasonable dismissal. So it will not be regarded as unreasonable dismissal. That means if a staff member refuses to cooperate, the employer would have no choice. Otherwise, the employer would have breached the law. There's the second one is that if employees are not able to go to work because of any compulsory testing requirements, if the employer wants to dismiss the employee, then that would constitute unreasonable dismissal. The third purpose is, now for some employees, they may be subject to restriction testing declaration or quarantine in retirement, say at Penny's Bay. Then for these people who are subject to compulsory testing notices or medical certificates issued by the Department of Health, then under the amended legislation, this will be deemed a form of medical certificate for taking sick leave. So it is hoped that these three measures will avoid labor disputes between employers and employees during the pandemic. Now, we've actually been appealing to the employers to adopt these measures, but then we've still received, views expressed by the labor bodies. Now, the third issue has nothing to do with the EXCO, that is the latest progress on anti-epidemic 6.0. You might recall on the 14th of January, I announced the introduction of Anti-Epidemic Fund 5.0. I said then we wanted to proceed quickly with that round, so that's why we did not go to LESCO to apply for fund injection. Instead, we made use of the balance of the fund, that is some $3.57 billion of the balance were used for the fifth round. So for those businesses and individuals affected by the latest round of tightened social distancing measures, they would be given assistance under the scheme, and also sectors that have been whose business have come to a halt because of the pandemic, that is the tourism sector, they also covered. Now, for the AEF 5.0, we have already invited applications for most of the subsidy schemes, and in some cases, there's not even a need to apply. We would disperse the funds where necessary. So hopefully, we're able to disperse the funds to those businesses and individuals in need. Now, in the light of the latest development of the epidemic, the government may have to extend or even strengthen certain social distancing measures. So last Friday, I mentioned that we are going to launch the sixth round of the AEF, that is AEF 6.0. Well, since then, which was just a few days ago, the Chief Secretary for Administration and various has been coordinating effort, and every department has been working hard on that. So we have almost finished the overall scheme for AEF 6.0. So together with contingency, we will be applying for fund injection of $26 billion. I said initially it would not be less than $20 billion, so now it's more than that. It's $26 billion, covering some 40-plus measures. And as we considered AEF 6.0, we did consider very carefully all the views given to us by the sectors and LESCO members. And then we try to be most compassionate and understanding in coming up with some support measures for the reference sectors and individuals, because we want to cover as far as possible all the sectors and individuals affected by the tightened social distancing measures. Now, there are over 40 measures under AEF 6.0. Please wait further for the details, because our colleagues are still sorting them out. But I can tell you it will be soon, because we have already reached a consensus with the chairman of the Finance Committee. The special meeting of the Finance Committee will be held next Tuesday on the 15th of February. And on that day, we'll be applying for a fund injection of $26 billion into the anti-epidemic fund. Of course, by Monday morning, we hope to be able to dispatch the document, and then you'll be able to find out details. Now, of course, I know someone has already written in their views, and they must be very much interested in finding out what's in the package. So perhaps I could give you some brief information here. Compared to the previous rounds of AEF 6.0 will have some special features. We are going to do AEF 5.0 again, that is for premises that have to be closed or because of the ban of dine-in services at night. Then we're going to do another round of disbursement funds. So for those who've been given funds, who are given subsidy under AEF 5.0, they will get another round of subsidy under AEF 6.0, and the amount will be more. But then for AEF 6.0, we would also like to take care of those who are not directly affected by the social distancing measures. because of the economic condition and the fewer activities as a result of social distancing measures, there are others who are indirectly affected. So for sectors indirectly affected by the social distancing measures, they'll be given support as well. So here we're talking about the tourism sector, which will be given support again under 6.0, because this sector is the hardest hit. And then other indirectly affected sectors will be included. For example, the passenger transportation services, laundry services, employment agencies, local farmers and produce, and so on. And then for AEF 6.0, we would also like to give support and show our gratitude to those who've been working hard under the fifth wave of the outbreak. That is the frontline workers who are involved in the fight against the spread of the disease. In my Facebook, I mentioned these people. That includes cleaning art workers and security guards. And so also there are others who are exposed to high risk because of their work. For example, workers handling air cargo at the airport. Here I could tell you that under AEF 6.0, the subsidy amount would be $2,000 per month per person for a period of 5 months. That means we will start the disbursement from February to the middle of the year. So for 5 months. $2,000 per month per person for 5 months, so in total is $10,000. That's more than what we gave out in the last round, which was $7,000 for 7 months, $1,000 per month. Now, for cleaning workers, the security guards, we don't distinguish between whether they're employed by government contractors or the private sector. So as long as these workers are employed by private property management companies, they will get $2,000 each month for a total of 5 months. And the third special feature of AEF 6.0 is that we've been listening very carefully to the views of LegCo members and labor union leaders. They said this wave came all of a sudden and it came on us hard. Regionally, the unemployment situation improved much. You might recall at the end of November, our unemployment condition improved substantially. The unemployment rate is only 3.9%. But now this wave of pandemic hit us really hard and fast. So many have become jobless temporarily, and they're not earning any income. So that's why in the AEF 6.0, we are thinking out of the box. For the very first time, we plan to give some support to those who are rendered temporarily jobless because of the fifth wave of the outbreak. We're giving them a one-off $10,000 of subsidy. Then, the scheme would not be straightforward, it would be really complicated. Please allow us some time to work out the logistics, and then we will announce how we are going to give this one-off support to those who are temporarily jobless. For AEF 6.0, as I mentioned, the total fund injection is $26 billion. 20% of that is contingency fund. For each round of fund injection, that's need to allow for contingency because there may be, unexpected demands that we need to meet. But in this round of AEF, definitely can see we're focusing more on individuals. So we take out the contingency amount, then we expect about 60% of the funds will be spent on individuals. So it's not the same as the previous rounds of AEF. As I mentioned, we have secured the agreement of the chairman of the Finance Committee. Next Tuesday, the 15th of February, we're going to hold a special meeting of the Finance Committee, and hopefully after the fund injection is approved, we could disperse the funds as soon as possible. Now, the Chief Secretary for Administration will be coordinating the effort, and when all the plans are fleshed out, an announcement will be made. In conclusion, I would like to say that we've been fighting this pandemic over a prolonged period in 2 years, but then we are now facing the most dire situation. we have seen a surge in the number of confirmed cases. Some are worried that the number may be beyond 1,000 each day, and so on. And then we see that the disease is, the cases are scattered all over the territory. So it's very difficult to cope with the situation. But then the government team fighting the virus, including the hospital authority staff and contractors, we are all giving our very best in this fight. And I appeal to the public to join us in the fight against the virus. Please help us on several fronts. One, please try to avoid going out as far as possible. So this will give us time and space to identify cases quickly, and then we could take immediate action, such as isolation and treatment and so on. So also, please, this will give us time to launch the vaccine, for us to boost the vaccination rate, especially among the elderly, so that we could launch the vaccine pass on a massive scale. And of course, we want to protect the public, and we want to keep our healthcare system from collapsing. At the same time, we want to return to normal life as soon as possible. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Please raise your hand, identify the organization you work for, and wait for the mic to go to you. Gentleman at the back row, please. Mrs. Lim, Now TV, a couple of questions. First, the shopping malls are incorporated into the list, and many people have to go through the shopping malls, like Zhongguanou shopping malls. So can people go home without vaccination? On the 24th, the vaccine pass will be implemented. The community vaccination centers have limited capacity. People are queuing up every single day. With such a short period of time, how can you make sure that people will get vaccinated in time? You also said that you will ban cross-family gatherings. How are you going to be able to implement this? Will the law enforcement agencies knock on the door and gain entrance to people's private premises? And how else are you going to implement this? You mentioned a moment ago that these are stringent measures. How far are we away from a curfew? Three questions there. First of all, later on at 4:30, we have the regular press briefing by the CHP. The Permanent Secretary for FHB, Mr. Chen, will be attending the press briefing later on, and he will be addressing questions regarding these new amendments, because he's more familiar with the situation than I am in this regard. This morning at EXCO, he addressed all these questions at EXCO. And if you have similar questions, you might wish to put this to Mr. Thomas Chen later on. Now, these measures are pretty stringent. These are very severe measures. We'd like to take advantage of this space and time to boost the vaccine coverage. To tackle this transmissible Omicron variant, if someone is vaccinated, the risk of suffering from serious conditions would be lower. If you view all these literature, we can protect the people of Hong Kong, not least the elderly people, and also the healthcare system. 2 years ago, I said the same thing. We have to safeguard the healthcare system in Hong Kong. Over the past 2 years, we haven't experienced any of the situation that we saw on TV, where the ICU is filled to the brim and people need oxygen treatment and so on. So it is important in the interest of Hong Kong to safeguard the healthcare system. So the key thing is to boost the vaccine coverage. We have to get people inoculated. In one of the European countries, they are having a vaccine mandate by law. We are not going as far as that. I believe that the people of Hong Kong, at our urgings, and also because of the inconvenience, now we're making things inconvenient for them. If you don't get the jab, you will not get a lot of choices that are available to other people. If you don't get the jab, you cannot go home by or via the shopping mall. It would be inconvenience for them, but then they will be able to go home by some other ways. Now, we are adopting stringent measures to protect Hong Kong. You mentioned the vaccine pass. Back in January, mid-January, before the Lunar New Year, I mentioned this particular date, if you recollect. At that time, I said that I was allowing people time to get the jab. Professor Sophia Chan said that the vaccine pass was to be introduced before the Lunar New Year, but after review internally, we should allow people to get vaccinated. Now, the vaccine pass means that the first jab, you can do this tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, or on the 23rd. There is still plenty of time for the first shot, and we do have the capacity. I think you may have got it mixed up with the testing center. We have a capacity of 60,000 per day. Yesterday, over the past 4 or 5 months, we managed to have 70,000. Normally, we manage 40, 50,000, but we can still boost the capacity. Mr. Patrick Nip has been identifying venues to add the number of vaccination centers, and shots can be administered at the private clinics as well. So there is no question of not having enough time. We have allowed plenty of time. Omicron variant will not wait for us to get vaccinated. So the 24th of February is a date that I mentioned about a month or so ago, and the government is going to be implementing this. Family gathering, I think you might wish to put a question to Mr. Thomas Chan later on. Next, please. Gentleman at the back, the far end. RTHK. Cross-family gathering. At the moment, there are many senior citizens who are living by themselves. If their children would like to pay them a visit, would this be allowed? Would there be any exemption at all? Now, in terms of shopping malls, you said that we should put the question to the Bureau later on, but in terms of the operation, it would be hard for a shopping mall with such a vast number of people for them to check the vaccine record. Is it feasible? Also, in terms of public transport, you said the administration did consider implementing vaccine bubble on public transport. Is it the case that this is not considered feasible, and that's why you're not implementing this? You're holding this off until such time as you have some means to implement this? On the first question, as I said in answer to the Now TV question, I think you should put this question to the Permanent Secretary. While these measures are stringent, we are being reasonable. We have had regard to people's circumstances. You might have a clear idea when you look at the bills. Now we have direct or indirect law enforcement under 599F. Let's say you go into a gym, it would not be hard to check the Leave Home Safe app and also the vaccination record. We have the new version of Leave Home Safe app. Now, this is direct enforcement. People will have to use these facilities when they go into premises. Now, there are also indirect enforcement. We will not proactively check, but there will be random checking. There will be authorization for all the staff to do so, like shopping malls, supermarkets, and so on. There will be random checking. If in the random checking you're not complying with the regulation, there will be action taken. This is being undertaken on a daily basis. It's like the ID card. People are supposed to go out with the ID card with them, but there is only random checking if anything happens. the law enforcement agencies would demand ID cards to be displayed. As to public transport, if you look at the regulation, we are amending the regulation in terms of the vaccine pass. We have a new piece of regulation that incorporates public transport. Although we are not enforcing this for the time being, it is more difficult, not simply law enforcement, but people have to use public transport on a daily basis. If people go for the jab, but they still have to use the public transport. So for the time being, we're not going to be implementing this. We're not invoking this power conferred upon the Secretary for Food and Health, but we do have the legal basis for the SFH to implement this if need be.
Two more questions. In the middle, the back row, please, the gentleman. I'm from Hong Kong 01. A number of questions. First, on your testing strategy, it seems that for buildings with sewage tested positive. Sorry, I can't hear you. Either you speak more slowly or you look at me, because if you're not looking at me, I can't really hear what you say. Can you hear me now? No. So first, about your testing strategy, we see that for buildings with confirmed cases or with sewage tested positive, you will do restriction testing declarations and so on. Now, you've been doing it for a few months, but then we're not seeing the pandemic easing, but rather the situation is getting worse. So do you think that your testing strategy is still working? Now, we're seeing exponential growth of confirmed cases. So would you listen to the views of experts or others that it's you will perhaps do testing on district? So that means you do testing on a wider scale. And the second question is about the testing capacity. Now, you said that you could probably do 300,000 tests in a day, but it seems that you're not able to collect samples quickly enough. We are seeing long queues at testing centers every day. So are you going to consider seeking help from the central authorities for provinces without serious outbreak? Maybe they could come and give us support so that we could do a massive test in one go. Third question is about the $10,000 unemployment support. Now, you plan to amend the employment ordinance for employees who are not vaccinated. The employees are allowed to dismiss them. At the same time, for those who become jobless, they could apply for the unemployment assistance. So how are you going to vet the cases? So if someone does not get vaccinated and then he's dismissed, is he eligible for the unemployment assistance? Well, the testing strategy doesn't just cover what you mentioned. The testing strategy is about risk assessment. It's a matter of where we devote our testing capacity. So what is the most effective way to identify infected cases so we could break the transmission chain? So where do we impose compulsory testing? For example, in a building or in a particular small area that there are confirmed cases, then we would do compulsory testing. Since the beginning of January, in the fifth wave of the outbreak, we have issued 1,575 orders on compulsory testing. I just want to give you an idea of the scale of testing. And the second situation is about premises. Say there are infected cases identified on certain premises. Say when we tracing contacts, we found that someone has lived in a particular building or has visited a certain building, and then in our sewage testing that covers a population of 5 million, we found positive samples. Then we will do compulsory testing. But of course, for some samples collected, the viral load may vary. Some may have high viral load, some may not. So, but anyway, for sewage tested positive, then we'll do testing too. And testing is not just by RTD. Sometimes we do RTD restriction testing declaration. Sometimes we do compulsory testing notices, CTN, or sometimes we just distribute self-administered rapid test kit. And we've done massive testing too, say at Tuen Mun. We encourage people to come forward for voluntary testing, covering some 140,000, some 200,000 people. So it was similar to the universal testing scheme. With these testing strategies, we were able to identify many cases. But of course, with Omicron, it is highly transmissible. There's transmission through environmental contamination, or there's also air transmission. It's not unique to Hong Kong. If you follow websites around the world, you'll see that there is exponential growth in number of Omicron cases daily in many places outside Hong Kong. So we have done much testing since the start of the fifth wave. We have issued 89 RTDs covering 120,000 plus people. And we identified 0.22% cases, because for the 120,000 people tested, that then for there are 97,000 samples with results, and we found 212 positive cases. So of course it's more effective than the voluntary testing, but still we want to give assurance to the public. So we are offering various choices of testing for them. In any case, our testing strategy has been working rather well. Of course, it's all about the number of tests that needs to be done. Now we are seeing the need for more and more RTDs, CTNs, or voluntary testing. So it's a question of demand and supply. On the demand side, you might notice that at around 1 a.m. today, we have revised the frequency of compulsory testing from 3 tests to 2 tests, considering the transmissibility of Omicron. So that means that we could reduce the testing needs by a third, and that will make, reduce the inconvenience cost to the public too. But this is science-based, so it's feasible. And then on the supply side, we keep increasing the supply. We are already doing some 200,000 tests now. In the past 3 days, every day we've been testing some 200,000 samples. But if we do more tests, of course, we need more facilities. We have 9 testing contractors. They are all working very hard to boost their capacity. And the constraints, not just with sample collection, is about the whole process. From setting up mobile testing station, keeping order at the station, collecting samples, and then delivering of the samples to the laboratory for testing, then reporting to the Center for Health Protection. Positive samples have to be sent to the public laboratory of the Department of Health for further testing. So at every step of the process, we need to boost the capacity. I know that the Chief Secretary for Administration is actually handling this issue now. Now, this morning, the EXCO gave encouragement to what we're doing, but then at the same time, we know there are people complaining about the long queues. So we are now considering ways to cut short the queues. Now, the central authorities have said that if we have any requests, they will certainly give us support. Now, we've been making requests and we've been receiving support. For example, for the testing contractors, where do they get their supplies for doing the tests? They come from the mainland, from Shenzhen. The batches sent to Hong Kong every day. It's like in 2019, there were 500 medical laboratory technicians, technologists coming from different provinces from Maine to come and help us with the test. So now we have the Hua Yan laboratory. We need technologists. They could come from the mainland. And then we're also seeking help from the central authorities to buy the rapid antigen test, RAT. We've been purchasing millions of such kits, and they will be delivered to us soon. So where we need to boost capacity in any step of the process, the central authorities will give us support if we need it. And on the temporary unemployment assistance, well, it's exactly what you've mentioned. That's why it's taking us so long to consider the arrangement, because whenever we use public funds, where we have to use it very carefully, we need to avoid abuses, and then we have to see whether we're able to check or verify information. So that's why perhaps we could make use of existing assistance schemes, for example, the Social Security Assistance Scheme, and then perhaps we could just relax the criteria, whatever. Anyway, before, if people were unemployed before the end of December, then of course they would require assistance. But maybe people lost their jobs because of Omicron since the end of December. And labor unions are telling us that these are people who feed from hand to mouth, and so they are not earning any income. So we try to help them as far as possible. And of course, we will not consider the reasons why they become unemployed. It's not possible to check on that. And we're considering various ways. Perhaps the best way is to consider their MPF contribution. Now, if they're no longer making contribution after December, when they've been doing so before that, that means they become unemployed, and we'll see. And in the second half of last year, we also see that businesses were not able to employ enough staff. So anyway, we'll see if that's a criterion for us to give out assistance.
Lady at the back in white, please. Dot News, you mentioned many times that Hong Kong has to boost the vaccine coverage, but the elderly population, the vaccine coverage is undesirable. It is less than 50%. What initiatives does the administration have to boost the vaccine coverage for the elderly population? Earlier, the administration said that there will be outreach program for vaccination. The effectiveness is pretty good. We're going to be adopting similar measures. And for children, there are many parents who have hesitancy about vaccination for their young kids. What publicity would there be, and what measures does the government up its sleeve? Thanks very much for the question. At the present moment, our priority in relation to this is vaccination. So the SAR government will spare no effort to boost the vaccination. The vaccination coverage is for 80% of the eligible population. In terms of the age profile, the young and the old, the vaccination coverage is not good enough. The young people, the children are different. The parents, it's only recently that we lowered the eligibility to year 5 to 12. And the previously, we administered the shots at school. Now classes have been suspended. Now the priority is now on the part of the senior citizens. As we said, for those above 70, the vaccination coverage is less than 50%. We have 500,000 who are unvaccinated. For those who are in the age bracket of about 70. So how can we incentivize them to go get the jab? There are a number of ways. We have 80 1,000 senior citizens who are frail, and they are living in the homes for the elderly. And less than 25% of them have been vaccinated. So we have mobilized a lot of outreach teams. We call them VMO, visiting medical officers. We are deploying them to the homes for the elderly to give the elderly people a checkup. If it is considered that they're fit for vaccination, we'll administer the vaccination. And we, this is one of the ways I'm really pleased to hear Chairman Chan of the Elderly Commission. He hopes that the vaccination coverage will be doubled, and we will be arranging for our VMOs to go administer the shots. For private doctors, they should also help. Our DH doctors are too busy. They may not be able to offer this kind of service. So I hope that the private practitioners will do this for us as well. And this will be paid for. Other than paying for the medical fee, we also are willing to pay the allowance for this to happen. The other question, the other measure, like you said, we have the mobile team, we have the mobile vehicles that will be deployed to areas where we have a high concentration of elderly people. Third, the elderly people are not able to book online, and we have the community vaccination centers, and there is no need for them to make prior booking. We do have the quota available only for the senior citizens. Unless you are elderly people, you're not allowed to use this kind of quota. I think the key thing is to urge the family members of senior citizens, if you know any elderly people in the neighborhood, to impress upon the elderly people the advantage of getting vaccinated. We hope that in a short period of time we can boost the vaccine coverage for the elderly population. And that will enable us to protect not just the elderly population, but also the healthcare system. This is a terribly important element in our anti-pandemic work. Thank you very much.
Okay. The gentleman. Yes.
Hi, Mrs. Lam from RTHK. So Alfred said the Secretary for Innovation and Technology earlier said that the government has no plans to make real name registration a must for the Leave Home Safe app. Does the vaccine pass scheme effectively make real name registration for the app compulsory now? And secondly, regarding the ban on private gatherings among different families, did you take into account the policy's impact on people's normal lives and mental health? And how can authorities enforce the rule? And thirdly, some of the entrances to the housing estates are inside the shopping malls. How can unvaccinated people return to their homes under the vaccine pass plan? And will there be any exemptions for those who might not be physically fit for vaccination? And lastly, you talked about the need for Hong Kong to buy time to ensure the vaccination rate is high enough earlier. Does the government have a target vaccination rate? And is there a point at which the government may consider changing its dynamic zero-COVID strategy? Thank you.
There are a few questions. Now, first of all, in the new edition of the Leave Home Safe, which also contains the person's vaccination record, that will provide a much better tracing capability, because on the vaccine record, we have far more personal data than on the Leave Home Safe, which does not require the individual to provide the personal data. So once we introduce a vaccine pass, we will have the record of the individual who goes into this venue in terms of the personal data, which will help the tracing. Now, that's why I noticed that one of the electoral members has described this move as killing two stones with one bird. That's true, I think. Now, issues about how are we going to apply and enforce the new regulation on prohibiting more than 2 households in a private place, you will have to ask the Permanent Secretary for Health later on. But I hope you realize, I hope we all realize that the time has come for Hong Kong to take some tough measures. And every measure that we now introduce has been undertaken in another jurisdiction, including some places and countries which are very proud of their human rights, their democracy, and so on. They are doing all these sort of things because this is about life. Public health prevails very often, the individual freedoms. But we will not make any individual in Hong Kong who simply could not live. So there will be exemptions, there will be compassionate treatment for this and that, but individual circumstances I could not comment. About a target, I have already set a target some time ago. I said if we could do first dose around 20,000 every day, then by the 24th of February, when we introduce the vaccine pass, we should have very close to 90%. Because every 20%, every 20,000 people taking a first dose on a daily basis will add 0.3% to the vaccination rate. And we are now 18.3, 18.4, and we still have 2-3 weeks to go. So let's set at least a common target that let us reach 90% when the vaccine pass become a common requirement in Hong Kong, and then we move on to beyond 90%. And within the 90%, we need to do much better for our elderly population, which is still now just below 50% for those aged 70 and above. And until all those things have happened, we will continue to adhere to the current strategy of trying to contain the spread of the virus, or what we call maintaining this dynamic zero regime. But when vaccination rates increase, when Omicron disappears and other things happen, then of course we will continue to revisit our strategy. But nothing will change our commitment to safeguard the life and the safety of the people of Hong Kong. Thank you.